Okay, quick update on the wiring. So this was the original box. Didn't have enough breakers, but I'm using a 100 amp breaker as the main disconnect to the sub panel, which is right here. So kind of convoluted. I might have been better off just buying a bigger sub panel since there's a disconnect at the house with a 100 amp fuse. Anyway, I've got it psyched out pretty good. Here's the light switches, and actually they run on through there and come off 2 spare breakers in the original box. Then the upper 3/4 conduit has a bunch of wires that goes to the lights, and we've got those on the 2 switches, and then it goes down to the south wall. So we've got 5 outlets there, double gang outlets, just like this one. Then, of course, that big, whatever it is, 1.25 inch, 1.5 conduit is the main wires, and then I'm using that as traces for the neutrals and that use those breakers. Okay, then I used a pulling L and a little piece of a 45 elbow to do the north outlets. So we basically have one at every post, which is 7.5 feet. And it took me a little while to psych it all out. Got my old book out that I bought to learn about doing the house wiring. But I think it's pretty slick the way it turned out. So here's what we've got. A little detail. So the top wires, we've got a green, a black, and a red. And they go all the way to the end. And down there, I'm going to have another disconnect. It's kind of an antique. It's a old Cutler hammer motor disconnect, or maybe it was used for a hot water heater, who knows. But this air compressor, which is also probably an antique by now, I bought from a neighbor, fixed up, and it's been passed around the family a little bit. But anyway, the plan is then to plug it in here, but just leave it here. And since this old air compressor doesn't have an on-off switch, I'm going to use this old knife switch. Of course, these wires are already fused, but anyway, it's got the old screw-in fuses. Now it's got 30 amp, but I'll probably put in 15 amp or 20 amp. Okay, so now back to the way we wired it, where I can kind of show you. So those were the top 3 wires. Then, in each station in this double gang box, I've got a 220, and this is a 20 amp, and then I've got a 110. But it's a 3-wire system, so you can see the black and the red come into this first. And rather than use wire nuts, I decided just to loop them all. So there's a loop going on that leg, loop going on that leg, and then those loops come over here to the 120. And so the top is on one side and the bottom's on the other. Now I didn't have to loop these because these outlets, you just stuff the wire in the back, and when you tighten a screw, it has a little brass clamp that clamps the straight wire. So they're really convenient to use. Of course, okay, since it's 110, it needs the neutral. So the neutral comes in to the box from the left, and then it carries on to the next station to the right. And same thing, you can just stuff those in, and it gets clamped nicely, so there's no twisting a loop on the end. And it's not a continuous wire. I could put 2 pieces, and like I said, I eliminate the wire nuts. You can see on these 2, you're probably familiar, but there's a bridge that bridges the top and bottom outlet. And Of course, I left that on the neutral, but I had to break it on the hot side. And now the advantage of using two legs and basically having 220 volts across the black and the red, even though the outlet's 110, is that if you've got two items plugged in, one top, one bottom, and say they're pulling about the same current, then the neutral wire, the current cancels out. So you cut your voltage drop in half, basically, because now you only have the voltage drop on either the black wire or the red wire. And I noticed this when I would use a shop vac on one and the old saw was a 110 saw on the other. And when I'd turn the saw on, you could hear the shop vac actually speed up. So I thought that was pretty neat. Now this little piece of tape says tab ? Well, on the other side of the room, the last outlet, I came back and finished that one morning and I'd forgotten to break that tab out. So basically I had shorted the black and the red. That's 220 volts across them. I had shorted those out because I'd not broken that connector tab off. And so when I flipped the breaker, it popped it instantly. So I thought I'd just make a little note to myself so when I installed the next ones, I could think about it and say, did I really break that tab off on the hot side? There you have it.